What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith. He is Robbie the Fire Bernstein. I am tired. How is everybody doing? What a few days it has been. And of course, we had to jump on here and get an episode in to talk about the results of the election and all of the ensuing craziness. How are you doing, Rob?
I'm excited for Poughkeepsie and Philadelphia. I already got some new jokes about this new administration, so I'm excited to get back out there and be in front of an audience.
Yeah, dude, we got 2 shows tonight, and when I booked these gigs, I did not exactly plan on having the week that I was having. Maybe not the best. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm excited too. I really do love Laugh It Up. Me and you have been going there.
It's our 3rd year now.
Our 3rd year going back. So we love this place. So it's a really fun club, and the staff and the owner, they're all very cool. And I'm looking forward to going up there tonight. But man, I'm beat up. I've been traveling quite a bit and going on very, very little sleep. And I feel like it's starting to hit me now, because like you're doing these big shows, it's kind of like the energy of that kind of carries you through it. But now as I'm like sitting here, I'm like, whew, all right, this is a lot.
I find when I'm out, it's like man on a mission, and none of the tiredness hits me because the anxiety of all the things that you have to show up to and the second I close the door of my apartment, it just hits me all at once and I just crash.
Well, so what happened to me is I had that moment, but I was at the Comedy Mothership. And I went out on election day. I went to Fort Lauderdale. I mean, if you guys probably saw the shows, so I went to Fort Lauderdale to do the Patrick Bet-David show. And so 2 days before I'm doing that, Rogan texts me and he goes, "Dude, you want to come on the podcast on Wednesday and do the post-election show?"
Which is an honor to get that spot, and my God, did you crush it? And we can get to it, but some of the things that you brought up and threw a trump for him to contend with was very important.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I had to go do it when Joe asked, I was honored, even though I've been on the show so many times. It was very cool that he thought of me to want to be on that episode. And of course, it was in a string of episodes that was like, it was like Trump, J.D. Vance, Fetterman, Elon Musk, Tim Dillon, and then me. How could I not do that? However, I had already committed to doing the Patrick Bet-David show till 3 a.m. And so I was like, okay. So I was like, all right, now I got to get from there to Austin. And we're recording the show at 1 p.m. So I stayed there till 3 a.m. And then, of course, there were no flights from Fort Lauderdale that got me to Austin on time. And this is only a few days, notice here. And so I had to go to Miami, which is like an hour. So then I lose another hour. So there's basically just no hope of getting any sleep at this point. Sat in a goddamn middle seat and coach because that's all that was available. So it's not even like, there's an option of sleeping on the plane or anything. It's just anyway. So, but, I'm going to do fucking Joe Rogan experience the day after Donald Trump is reelected. So who cares? You'll sleep when you're dead is the attitude. I'm going to do that. And I had a lot of shit that I wanted to say. So then I go do that. So we record. We're done. Me and him hang out and bullshit. I think he was running a little bit late, and then we talked for a little while before we started. So by the time we're done with the podcast, it's like 5. So then we finish the podcast, and then he goes, he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go by the club tonight." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to go do some fucking stand-up at the best comedy club in the world and hang out with Rogan and Tony and all those guys, Ron White and all those guys." And but then it's like I'm now, like when you're up all night, it's like you start entering this, like there was no option to like go nap. It's like if I go sleep now, I'll be dead in a couple hours. So there's no way I can do that. So then I do a spot on the Mothership show and then on the early show. And then I went back in the green room. I was bullshitting with Joe and Tony for a while, had a couple drinks. And then there was like the Late Show was starting, and that was when I went. They went, "Oh, you want to do a spot on the Late Show?" And I was like, "No, no. I'm not." Like, it just like it hit me, and it was all there in public in front of people. It wasn't like I was at home, closed the door, but I was just, you get that feeling where it's almost like you're like walking on clouds, kind of. You know what I mean? Like when you just haven't slept and you just start feeling all off. And so then I went and then just like passed out like death. And then had to wake up to go do Alex Jones' show. So
He'll wake you up,
one
though.
night of sleep.
That's like an alarm clock in your face, you know?
Yeah, no. There's no way you're going to be fine for that time. But anyway, so yeah, back home. I was very happy to be back home, get a little bit of time with the wife and kids. And now we're back out to Poughkeepsie.
Maybe this is an inappropriate on-air, on-the-spot question. I caught a bit of the AJ episode while it was live, and it was great. It seemed like he was tempered, and he even claimed that he listened to the show, which was cool. Let you get some fine talking points across. Behind the scenes, what was that like rolling into that studio and meeting him and all that?
There wasn't much. I didn't really interact with him much off air. He was already recording. He does a long show. So he's on when I came in. So I went they have a crazy setup, beautiful studio. And
about to be owned by the folks of Connecticut.
Well, yeah, it looks like I think they're getting shut down pretty soon. But I think he'll continue, to do a show. And to be huge. But yeah, so he was already doing the show. And then when we wrapped, he continued the show. So we just like during some commercial breaks, because he's on radio, like, so he has commercial breaks, like we bullshitted a little bit. But he was great. I mean, he was, he was at his Alex Jones best. I kind of felt like when I was there with him, and he loved everything I had to say and stuff. So it was like, yeah, I don't know, it was cool. It was interesting. I've never met him before, and he definitely like, I don't know how much he actually listens to the show or not, but he definitely like knew us, and he was excited. He was in, so that was cool. It was all a very cool experience.
I thought the coolest thing of the Rogan, and everybody still go check out my special. It's still up. We're getting some views on it. Response has been good. Robbie the Fire live from the Denver Comedy Garage, not an actual place. The fact that right after the election, you were able to get ahead of Trump making announcements and put out into the world that he has to make good on his promise of actually freeing Ross, and that he needs to make better appointments and specifically not allow Mike Pompeo in. The big name on the list that seems like, it seems to me just based off of the way he was utilizing him at the end of the campaign, and he's such a dumbass and he's such a war hawk, but it looks like maybe Marco Rubio is going to be the deep state representative in the administration. But I just thought that was an incredible moment that you were able to put into the world on a very large stage of, hey, no Mike Pompeo, and go speak to Rand Paul for some better appointments.
I think it was about 30 seconds after Joe texted me and asked me to do the show that I was like, that's what I'm going to do. It was like, if, and I was really hoping that it was all said, it was done. Because I didn't know if it was a very weird situation to be going into doing Rogan's show on such a big day, which, like, again, I've done the show a lot of times, but this is kind of a unique thing. But I've never done the show before where I was going in being almost like, oh shit. So in my mind, I almost have to like think, okay, there's like 3 scenarios that this could be Donald Trump just got elected. This could be Kamala Harris just got elected, or this could be we still don't know. And like, so you had to be very, and there was no question. It was obvious that I was like, best case scenario, Donald Trump wins on election day, and then I can go and have all this kind of like leverage to be like, hey, you promised this, your mandate is this. Also, and this is one of the reasons why I ultimately ended up, throwing my support behind Donald Trump, is that there's this group around him of people who are very influential on him, who I'm fairly influential on. Like, which is okay. It's not perfect. It's not, but it's like, Vivek Ramaswamy and Tucker Carlson and Bobby Kennedy and a lot of these guys, they listen to what I have to say. And they're also like, they agree with me on this. And so that's what I've been doing both publicly and privately, is trying to just get everybody, because now this is the move. Everybody pressure as much as you can to not make the same mistakes as the first time and keep the goddamn warhawks out of his administration. And I don't know if we'll be successful at that, but at least with Trump, there's something to work with there. You know, there's something to maybe he'll listen to some of these people, you know? So yeah, that was kind of my game plan going into it. And I tried as many times as I could to call Mike Pompeo Liz Cheney's pick for defense secretary. But anyway, yeah. So look, let's talk about the election. Let's talk about the response to it and how it all went down a bit. I mean, look, obviously we've been talking about this election for, you know, I mean, a couple years, I guess now, but we've really focused on this for the last few months. And I guess so like my first thing that I would say, right, is on our last episode and on several episodes before that, I had made the point that every indicator that you can actually observe with your senses was telling you that Trump's going to run away with this in a landslide. Like, that's what you know what I mean? Like, it was just so obvious that, like, this is the culture has moved. His support has moved. The amount of people publicly supporting him has moved. All of these things while she's just terrible. And there's no enthusiasm there. I mean, she didn't have a fraction of the enthusiasm that Hillary Clinton had. And she had trouble getting enthusiasm. And yet the polls are telling you it's neck and neck. It's the closest election of our lifetime, all of this stuff. And so there was something kind of satisfying about being like, oh, okay, it was actually the scenario that it seemed to be. And once that happened, and look, I will say, I was worried about deep state shenanigans, let's say, through this whole time. I had said many different times, I'm not sure they will allow him back in. To be fair, that prediction has not failed yet. He's not back in, but looks pretty bad. I did say, though, on the last episode that you had essentially won me over and that your prediction seemed to be better. It just looked like Trump was going to win. I did not think he would win in the landslide that he won in. I really just thought it was impossible in today's polarized political environment to win a landslide like that. But he is, I mean, he dominated, you know? I mean, there's just no other way to put it. I mean, he just like absolutely crushed her. Not just winning a few of the swing states that he needed to win, but like winning the popular vote and all of that. I mean, that was pretty wild. And so when you see that, when you see, you know, this, okay, that is what it was. What we observed is reality, and clearly he, you know, was way, way out ahead of her. There's a lot of things that we could point to. So, by the way, as of right now, I'm checking the latest results. Donald Trump is up by, I think, 4+ million in the popular vote. He has 295 electoral votes, but Arizona and excuse me, sorry, hold on. Shoot. No, sorry, I got to get back to this. But so Arizona still has not been called yet, and Nevada has still not been called yet, and Trump is winning in both of those. So it looks like he's going to be well north of 300 electoral votes when this is all said and done, and have won the popular vote by millions. This is a mandate unlike anything Trump ever had. This isn't 2016 where he lost the popular vote by millions of votes and just won, you know, the counties that he needed to win by the thinnest of margins. This was a dominant performance. And when you see that, look, there's a lot that can be said here. There's a lot that you can talk about what really happened. And a lot of what happened here was something that is very interesting and new and kind of a revolution to some degree in the way presidential campaigns are run. But then there's also some just really conventional things that are like, oh yeah, of course. Like, of course, this wasn't going to work. I mean, like very, very basic things like she was uniquely terrible. Uniquely terrible. Look, everybody, you almost go back to the fact that for 4 years now, shows like ours and other shows that were being honest in this space, and just people who who were talking about this, we're talking about Joe Biden's cognitive state. It was very obvious from at least 2019 that like Joe Biden was in some type of severe cognitive decline. And the idea, and obviously it got much worse over those years, but the idea of like, could he do a second term just seemed like there was not enough mileage in that car. You know what I mean? Like you're talking about a car with like 400,000 miles on it and you're planning a cross country trip. It'd be crazy if it never came into your head, I'm not so sure this thing's going to make it. That, I don't know. We might have some issues with this. And when people would think about that, all of us would go, maybe it's Gavin Newsom. Maybe it's Gretchen Whitmer. Maybe it's Michelle Obama. We started going to non-politicians in our head while she is the sitting vice president. She is the obvious choice. You know what I mean? She's the obvious next in line. And still all of us just skipped over her because, well, she's so terrible. There's no way you could run her and win. So they'd have to go with someone else. Now, the Democrats and Joe Biden, obviously, not just in hindsight, but you could tell this in real time, made an enormous mistake. Or maybe a mistake isn't even exactly the way to put it, but all of the different incentives lined up to that, if you view the thing as a machine, as one entity, it was like either Joe Biden had to announce that he wasn't running again, or he had to run again. But what you couldn't do is have him go all the way late into the campaign, have the entire media and the entire political apparatus cover for him, not have a primary, shut RFK down, not have anybody else run against him, and then swear that there's absolutely no problem and he's sharp as a tack, have the most disastrous debate performance in the history of presidential televised debates, and then throw this extraordinarily weak candidate in at the fourth quarter to not even have enough time to do it, and then just try to gaslight the country and tell you that she's hope and joy and wonderful. Obviously, in hindsight, that's a disaster of a strategy, and it doesn't need to even be this bold new world, which it is. By the way, I'm not like, that's an element of it too, but even in any conventional, traditional year, if I just showed you that on paper, you go, oh, that's a disaster. That candidate's going to lose. So that is a huge part of this. Kind of can't get away from it.
I think that is a fair summary of their choice to go with Kamala Harris.
Now, another element here, and this is just kind of conventional politics, Donald Trump picked a VP that was an asset, that brought something.
Well, not at first. He rallied in the fourth quarter.
Well, look, what I'm saying is that J.D. Vance did a very good job on Joe Rogan. J.D. Vance did some CNN interviews where he did a good job. He has some strengths that Donald Trump doesn't have. He's smarter than Donald Trump. He's more well-read than Donald Trump. He is, however you feel about J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance, his story that they made that movie out of, or the book and the movie out of, J.D. Vance is a guy who was raised by a single mom who was a drug addict, came from nothing, and was a Marine and a venture capitalist and a senator, and just on paper, that's a kind of impressive person. She picked a VP who brought absolutely nothing to the table. She picked someone who, it's like as if the only criteria was, you can't outshine me. And that's who they went with. I think that also really hurt her. When
they said they were going to run the Joy campaign, they needed to find a gay guy.
Yeah, right, exactly. I guess you're right. So they had to make it a pride campaign. But yeah, so like that was really bad. On top of all of that, of course, she was, an extraordinarily terrible candidate. There's really no other way you can say it. She was just profoundly bad at this. And then, of course, there is the fact that Donald Trump did something. I mentioned this on Rogan the other day, but and this is kind of interesting to me too, because for people who have followed the show and followed us for years, obviously, if you're familiar with like what we did with the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party and all of that, this was something that was on my mind in 2020. This was something that I was heavily critical of the Joe Jorgensen campaign for not doing in 2020 or making any attempt to do. That it's just like, because it was so obvious. It's not like some brilliant insight on my part, but it was like, hey, like obviously CNN and Fox News and MSNBC and the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Associated Press and they are not going to like, in any reasonably fair way, shine a light on any campaign that is truly anti-establishment. That's not going to happen. However, we live in a new world where there's shows on the internet where you actually get a lot more time and don't have to worry about 6-minute segments with commercial breaks afterward, where you could talk and discuss ideas for hours and hours, and they get way more views than those. And it's like, obviously, that's the path forward, is to rally on all of these shows. And like, so the libertarian candidate or any anti-regime candidate isn't going to get a fair shake on CNN, but they sure might get one on Joe Rogan, and not just Joe Rogan, but, Tim Pool and Patrick Bet-David and, all of these, shows. And really, Vivek Ramaswamy and Bobby Kennedy were the first two presidential campaigns who ever went like, oh, we're going to use that strategy. We're going to go talk to these people. I mean, who cares if the show is on part of theproblem.com or on YouTube or on CNN? The whole game is how many people are watching. That's all that matters. And more people are watching these, so why not go do all these shows? And Donald Trump followed in their footsteps. He was the only major party candidate who's ever used that strategy. He went on a ton of podcasts, and she didn't. She went on the one Call Her Daddy one. It was boring and flopped and didn't get that many views on it. And then she was scared to go on Rogan. And like, that is a huge part of this story. And I'm not saying that's all, but that was a big part of it. Donald, there is, and this is one of the most amazing things about this campaign. And even if Donald Trump's second term is every bit as bad as his first term, even if it's worse than his first term, which, by the way, is a real possibility, that even if that's the case, I think that the precedent has now been set that you are going to have to run a candidate who could do a 3-hour podcast, like who could sit and have something to say. Listen, I know this because I've done a lot of cable news hits over the years. Like, I've done hundreds and hundreds of appearances on cable news. I mean, I worked for Essie Cup over at CNN for a year and did regular, like 3 or 4 times a week. I would do, segments on her show. And then for many, many years, I did Kennedy and Red Eye and Gutfeld, and I've done a bunch of other ones as well. And I am telling you, because I know these people, when you turn on cable news, you see the little, a panel, and it's a 10-minute maybe segment. I know a lot of those people. I've hung out with them. I've went and got beers with them after the show. I've hung out in the green room with them. 80% of them don't have 3 hours worth of stuff to say. They'd run out. I was always amazed by this. In the cable news segment, in their 5 minutes that maybe they get on air, they repeat themselves. They just say talking points. Because there is nothing deeper. They don't actually have anything to say. It's a whole different game to say, do what we do, where we do 4 episodes a week. We do 4 hours of content every single week on this. By the end of the, that's, I don't know, several hundred hours a year of content that we put out. You have to have a lot of things to say in order to do that. And Kamala Harris doesn't have that. It wasn't, because I just want to be clear here. It wasn't a foolish decision to not do Joe Rogan's podcast. It was a wise decision if Kamala Harris is your candidate. In the same way that, like, if a 5-year-old is your boxer and he's going up against another boxer, the wise decision is to throw the towel in immediately, right? Now, that's not a good strategy to win a fight, but it is the best strategy given the reality that you have a 5-year-old fighting a professional boxer. Kamala Harris does not have 3 hours worth of things to say. She tries to say nothing through a 15-minute interview. She tries to just fill space. She's got nothing. She doesn't have views on issues. She doesn't think about public policy and read newspapers and have opinions about the latest conflict in whatever region of the world. She doesn't have any of that. What was she gonna do, right? And so I think the precedent that's been set now is that you have to have a candidate who has a mind. That doesn't mean they have to be perfect or they have to have the right answers or even be a good candidate, but they have to be able to do that. And that in itself is a tremendous step forward. And like, I think one that just can't be overstated.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, and you think about all of the names that it just eliminates from being able to run in the future. Like, for example, Biden couldn't have done that. Biden would have been out. Or if you look at the old field of Democrats, Klobuchar couldn't get through that. Bernie Sanders actually could. Who else ran with Hillary Clinton?
Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's VP.
No, not the VP. I'm just saying it's interesting to think about the field of people that would get eliminated in that format, and that at least you'd be, although you still have your lying scumbags and whatnots, you get at least the more impressive level of them.
Yes.
Like amongst, for example, the Republicans, what's his name, who I don't particularly like, but the senator from, like Rand Paul can handle 3 hours. He's an actual person. Or Ted Cruz is smart enough. He can handle 3 hours without a problem. But some of the less impressive people who are teleprompter people would all fall to the wayside.
Yeah, well, that's right. That's right. And even that's a good start, at least, you know?
Yeah.
It's a good start, at least, to like get these dummies out of here. Like, you can't just do that. You can't just have the mouthpiece for, you know what I mean? Like I have nothing to say. I'm just here to be a shill. You have to at least have something to say. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is ZBiotics. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct and not dehydration that's to blame for the rough next day. ZBiotics pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. So go check them out right now, zbiotics.com/POTP to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use the promo code POTP at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Head on over to zbiotics.com/POTP, and don't forget to use that promo code POTP at checkout for 15% off. All right, let's get back into the show. Of course, the other, I think big story here. Well, look, I mean, the other thing is that there were just basic issues that I think we've been calling out for quite a while now that ended up being really what decided this campaign. And it's interesting as we get some of this exit poll data to see how, the machine, the media machine is trying to spin this. And of course, they want to spin it in any way except recognizing the obvious, which is that they are dead. They are done. Look, what happened here was that Donald Trump, it's funny. I saw a few, and we're going to play a couple clips in a second because, of course, how could we not? It's just so entertaining. But there were the way that I've seen this presented in the corporate news so far is that, well, it turns out the big split isn't actually racial lines, right? Because they have to admit that, because Donald Trump did like remarkably well, particularly with the Latino vote. But they go, and the big split isn't even really gender. You know what they say it is now, Rob? Education. It's education. College educated people went for Kamala Harris, and people that didn't have college degrees went very largely for Donald Trump. But like, what's just another way of saying the same thing? Trump carried the working class. Like that's what you're saying when you say that, just saying it in a different way. Then Donald Trump carried the working class. Well, why is that? And it's the money. It's money. The inflation, the loss of purchasing power of the dollar. Look, man, if you're the truth is, and look, this isn't 100% true, and there are people, I think I'm one of these people who, like, I make good money, but I did spend many, many years being very, very broke, and I also think I'm somewhat thoughtful and can think about what people in different situations are going through. But the truth is that, look, I don't particularly like inflation. I've been robbed of some of what I earn through inflation, but it hasn't really been a disaster for me. I'm okay, like that, because I'm doing well, So like, if my cup of coffee goes from being $2 to being $5, it's like that's a little annoying, but I still go and get the coffee for $5, and that's life. But like, that's not true for working class people, man. And like, how hard is it to just fucking take a second and empathize with that? Yeah. Person on CNN who makes $700,000 a year. Yeah, obviously inflation doesn't really matter that much to you. But to the guy making $60,000 a year, it's devastating. Just absolutely devastating. And that's what they were voting on. The economy was better for them for the first 3 years of Donald Trump than it was for the entire Biden administration. And the other thing, obviously, is the immigration crisis. These are the issues that we knew were going to be the big issues, all went in Trump's direction. And if I'm being completely honest, Donald Trump didn't even run that great of a campaign. He just kind of went and did the shows. He did what Donald Trump does, and he wasn't afraid to go like promote himself, because that's his favorite thing to do. But he had just the fundamentals of this race were so on his side. They were so on his side. You had a crisis with inflation and a crisis with immigration, and there was Donald Trump. I kind of think it's just that simple. For the major factor, I think, is that simple. I don't know. Any thoughts on any of this?
I would just put two more simple factors on the table, and if I had to rank the things that were important to people, what you just mentioned, I'd put into the first two spots. But I think factor number 3 is the being lied to about Joe Biden's competency. Even though people might not have talked about it all that much, I do think that rubbed people the wrong way, of knowing that the Democratic establishment lied to them about a return to normal that never happened, and actually putting up a world leader who had dementia, who was not up to the task. So I think that there was anger, even though that wasn't spoken about all that much, I do think that people were angry with the regime for specifically that. And while we're on the topic of being lied to, I think some eyes were opened up to being lied to over the COVID regime, and that the tech censorship is not necessarily in their favor, and that maybe they didn't like the way the deep state went after Donald Trump with 5 court cases. But I think there was an inherent flavor of there's an unfairness to the way that the Democrats are screaming, yelling and actually operating the country. And I think that there was a big unease over the Ukraine war. And the Israel war, which is twofold of why is this money being spent abroad when we have this many problems here? If you actually care about the American people, why is this money being spent in this way? and a general feeling of unease of, I kind of feel a little bit less safe, and that there's a lot more tension in the world when there doesn't have to be. And I don't know if it was any more sophisticated than that, but I think I do think that those two variables did play a noteworthy in the election. And then when they tried to run Kamala Harris and just scream at you some more, the same as, no, there's not really inflation in the supermarket. No, you just don't like this person because you're a lady and because you have to actually go face your own closeted bigotry that you won't let a lady be in charge. Or why do you care about that we told you that she was the wrong race? I think all of that's starting to resonate with people.
I would absolutely agree with you. I think that, for many, many years, at least since 2011, let's say, many level-headed, reasonable people have been making the point that if you call everything sexist and racist, the words start to lose their meaning, and then you have nothing to go to when something is actually sexist or racist, like a boy who cried wolf type thing. And once Donald Trump, if you remember correctly, if you zoom out a little bit here, so in 2012, when the corporate media was attempting to get Barack Obama reelected, he was running against Mitt Romney, the most boring, square, just establishment guy who, in truth, would have governed very differently, very similarly, I should say, to how Barack Obama governed. And you remember the binders full of women moment? So he's asked at one point at a debate about how he didn't hire enough women at his company, Bain Capital. And
he was trying to run a good company, which he did.
And there was, listen,
have
I'm
you
not
seen
saying,
our profits and returns? That's what he should have said.
Just saying it was a very successful company. You draw whatever conclusion you want to from that. But so he has this moment where he's asked, how come you didn't hire more women? And he goes, listen, we did everything we could. We were trying to hire more women. I specifically told my guys to hire more women. And he said, we asked for binders full of women. It was a clunky way to put it, but essentially he was saying that, like, we were trying to put together, like, who are the best women in this thing. And they flipped out over this comment and called it sexist. This was like a big scandal in 2012. It made no sense whatsoever. There was nothing offensive about the term binders full of women. It did kind of sound clunky, and so they just ran with that. Like, I don't even know what the angle was, but it was like, he wants to put women back in binders or whatever, like it didn't make any sense. But so then when Donald Trump came around and he's actually saying, like, grab him by the pussy and all this shit, they couldn't just say sexist and racist. I mean, they did. They said all of those things, but then it's like they had to elevate it. This is where Nazi came in. They went to Nazi because all of the old words, like, and you could feel this, like, the whole way through, right? They were accusing Donald Trump of being racist, but they couldn't just say racist anymore because they had called the Tea Party racist and Herman Cain racist and Mitt Romney racist and everything was racist. You had to have a stronger word to go to. So they went to Nazi. But then, anyway, the point that I'm building toward is that many people had been saying for years and years and years, you're robbing all of these terms of any of their meaning, And I think what you saw in 2024 was it was almost like a critical mass like thing where you just hit a level where these words had no value. It had no value. You could scream every single day, end of democracy, Hitler, Nazi, racist, sexist. No one cares. It did not move the needle a centimeter. It's just, that's it. People are over it. So I think that was a huge part of it.
I think...
go ahead.
To go on that, I think, to me, that's the thing that I feel most positive about for this new run is that the last time, I think COVID hurt Trump quite a bit, and maybe the corpses voting might have hurt him as well. But I think one of the big reasons why people voted against Donald Trump had nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was that they were sick of the reaction to Donald Trump, which was the constant temper tantrum from the left and feeling like politics had become more of their life, which was because there was a constant freak out about Donald Trump being in the Oval Office. And it was, I don't know if you guys remember it, but it was it was a constant, and it was why we saw more censorship, and there was the entire political climate became a lot louder as a response and the temper tantrum to Donald Trump, and as opposed to what usually happens with the kid having a temper tantrum, you realize it's a temper tantrum and you don't give into it. A lot of the country said, I just want this to stop, and they affiliated the temper tantrum as being Donald Trump causing it. I think Donald Trump winning again is a rebuke of that. And so I'm hoping that in this climate, the media is not going to do it again. And if they do, they're going to be called out for just being 4-year-olds, and people aren't going to actually pin that on Donald Trump.
As I've been saying for a while, I think you're right about that. I think that is what's going to happen. And I think that like the difference between then and now is that we are so many major lies further. You know, the big ones are Russiagate falling apart and COVID. And then you just can't overstate how big the COVID, even by November of 2020, it hadn't been it wasn't clear yet to, I think, most people that the entire COVID thing was a big scam and that none of it needed to happen. It was all nonsense. I mean, there were people who were against the lockdowns, certainly from the perspective of two people who were doing a pretty popular show and were, huge critics of all of the COVID policies. We knew people were coming our way and there were people who were open to it, but it was still, I mean, do you just take, for example, okay, which I use this as almost like, I'm thinking of when you went on Corinne Fisher's podcast, and I think you were arguing about maybe it was the vaccine or COVID policy or whatever. And it was and I just use that podcast as a stand-in for a completely uninformed voter, I guess, in my mind. But so when you were on that show and you're going and talking to normies who don't know what's going on in the world, it was a very interesting show if nobody ever saw it. But so you go in there and you're kind of debating the entire room. But there was this energy about when you would say oh yeah, the vaccine's bullshit and the lockdowns were bullshit and all this. And the entire room is gasp, And then you start debating them and you're just destroying everyone. None of them know anything about this. But you're right and they're wrong. But the point I'm making is that I don't know particularly, but if you went back on that show today, that had never happened, I just don't think there'd be a gasp. I think if you said that, most people would go, oh yeah, no, none of us are still getting the vaccine for COVID. You know what I mean? Nobody, it's just, it was so life-altering for so many people, and it disrupted people's lives so much. And then to find out afterward that it was all bullshit, that's powerful. And then even just, continuing on, there were so many different things, inflation is transitory, Ukraine is winning the war, Biden is not senile. That was a really big one. That was a big one, to sit there and just lie and pretend that what everybody can see. Again, they're in the business of propaganda. They're in the business of lying. But this lie was so blatant. You know what I mean? This lie was, I'm not exaggerating when I go, it's on the level, if I just said to our entire audience right now, Rob is not wearing a red hat.
Never would.
Rob's not wearing a red hat.
I don't like the color red.
Yeah, nobody wears red. That's guys, everybody watching the show right now, that is a far-right conspiracy that Rob is wearing a red hat. And you're just yeah, but I see it, man. I
would never proudly represent our underwear sponsor. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, it's it was on the level of that. You're going to pretend it's Emperor's New Clothes shit. You're going to pretend he's dressed in beautiful garments right now. That's what you're telling me? And we're not going to acknowledge what we all see there? That was a big one. And then, there's just the idea of just trying to convince everybody that this chick was actually great, which they're kind of still attempting to do. I don't see how they're going to be able to effectively sell the next narrative, And by the way, as I've kind of noticed, one of the ones that I think people are starting to wake up to now, which is the other, has the potential to be another one of these. It's to me, the corporate media, the state propaganda apparatus is dying a death of 1,000 self-inflicted cuts. Like they just keep doing it to themselves. But the next one that you can already see developing here is that it's the end of democracy. Democracy's on the ballot. Trump wins, will be a dictatorship. It's like, this is pretty clearly already. And look, there's little things like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they spoke after Trump won in her concession speech, and then he was speaking the other day. They both were like, hey, we're down, but we're not out. You know, continue to fight. Like, we'll come back and win. This wasn't the result we wanted, but we'll be back and blah, blah. And you're like, yeah, but dude, now that's kind of exposing that when you said this was the end of democracy, oh, that was just campaign talk? Like, all right. Everybody always has a little bit of campaign talk, but that's pretty egregious to just claim this is going to be the end of democracy, and then as soon as it happens, be like, all right, it's not the end of democracy, guys. Don't worry, everything's fine. That's tough.
I told that joke on Run Your Mouth that Kamala Harris agrees to a peaceful transfer of power to who she said is a known fascist. It's like, how do you justify that one when you were on the news saying, yes, he's a literal fascist, and then you got to get on the news 2 days later and go, yes, I will, of course, engage in peaceful transfer of power. Pretty incredible.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and then on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fat or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time, and Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. Your metabolism is your body's energy. It's how your body turns the food you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates into a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, and much more. Lumen, of course, will tell you exactly what's going on with your metabolism and give you recommendations to improve your metabolic health. It's really an incredible product. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health right now, go to lumen.me and use the promo code PROBLEM to get $100 off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me, and use the promo code PROBLEM at checkout for $100 off. Thanks to Lumen for sponsoring this episode. Let's get back into the show. Yeah, the whole thing is wild.
I think my guess is they're going to drop the end of literal democracy, and they're going to go straight to, and they have a claim on this one. They're going to talk about the dangers of the policies that he actually goes ahead to implement. So some of the ones that are on the table is if RFK Jr. actually steps into some of a health role, and even if he's just trying to roll back seed oils, I'm sure you're going to hear on the news health experts, similar to COVID, this is dangerous and reckless policy. The FDA food guidance has said this, and the regulations this. So anything that they try and do, unless they sit down at the table with Pfizer and they make the prearrangements of what Pfizer's willing to concede to, my guess is you're going to see a big stink over that. I already put forward, I think it was on a subscriber episode of the Rob Bernstein amnesty plan for deportations, of allowing people to stay as long as they sign away birthright citizenship and basically register that they will not be taking any free goods from the United States government and be paying taxes. But there's a chance of some sort of an actual deportation. That's going to give the media a lot of opportunities for tear-jerking footage of something that the American people don't want to actually contend with. The kids in cages, when that was going on, did work well. That's partly why Biden was processing people out of the center so quickly, was to make sure that there weren't going to be inhumane images. So if they do push forward with some sort of actual deportation, I think the reality of that will be unpopular with the general American public, and the media will give him a hard time for that. And then lastly is if he does try and wind down the Ukraine war, which I think that one's likely. I think Israel will continue. I'm not sure that at least in the first, while it's still on the table, same as we heard about the Kurds, we'll hear more about how dangerous it's going to be and how all of Europe's going to be taken over by Russia. So I think the media will probably pivot to any legislation that Donald Trump's actually moving forward with, and he's got a political climate where he should be able to get what he wants done. If he can't get a wall built in his first 2 years while he's got Senate and potentially the Congress, I mean, just call the guy a complete and total failure. But they actually, I think, will have genuine criticism that they'll be able to lobby at him about why they think the agenda is dangerous, that maybe we're going to move on from some of the nonsense talking point of, hey, the guy's a dictator.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see that. I think you're absolutely right. But yeah, listen, Donald Trump won a landslide. He has a mandate. He has the Senate. I don't know. Are the House results in yet? But I think
not yet. But chance. I think it's trending well. From what I've been so focused on the other stuff. That's been mostly like headlines.
Me too. But so. Yeah, man. But look, if you've got the Congress and the White House and you won a landslide and the central issue of your campaign and the either central or second biggest issue of the election was immigration, if you can't get it done now, I mean, then it's never happening. So this is the time for that. All right, I do want to play.
By the way, just last thing. Donald Trump's first publicity stunt. Well, actually, I was joking on Run Your Mouth that he should bomb the windmills, but and say we're not going back. He should take the slogan. But what he should really do is he should go track down the wall parts that were sold for pennies on the dollar and just make a publicity stunt out of going to the places where they've been warehousing the walls and repurchasing them from whatever random individuals picked them up for pennies on the dollar. And just make a scene out of what the Biden administration did to unwind his efforts of building the wall and actually getting it done.
Yeah. No, that wouldn't be a bad way to play it. Here, I want to go to this clip, the first one I sent you, Natalie, because it was interesting to me to just watch some of how the media is, and when I say the media, I mean the dying legacy corporate media, how they are processing this result.
And I think it's important to say that, anyone who has experienced or been in the United States for any period of time and experienced this country's history and knows it cannot have believed that it would be easy to elect a woman president, let alone a woman of color. Mm-hmm. Let's just be clear. Mm-hmm. And nothing that was true yesterday about how flawlessly this campaign was run is not true now. I mean, this really was an historic, flawlessly run campaign. Queen Latifah never endorses anyone. She came out and endorsed. She had every prominent celebrity voice. She had the Taylor Swiftie to the Swifties. She had the Beehive. Like, you could not have run a better campaign in that short period of time. And I think that's still true. And I think it's important.
So I just, of all the clips of the media, and there's a bunch out there, and it's always one of the most fun parts of Donald Trump winning is watching these people just absolutely, lose their mind. But is there anything that was like more of a perfect demonstration of why they are doomed to fail? They are incapable of breaking out of the tiny little box of thinking that they're allowed to have. It's like, first of all, to make the claim that anybody who's spent any time in America knows that the reason she lost is because she's a black woman. That's it. That's the story here. And then and again, they don't even feel the need to provide any evidence for that. Like what are you backing that assertion with? Like, because in fact, all I see is that the only reason she was there is because she's a black woman. Like, what are you talking about? But regardless of that, to make the claim that Kamala Harris ran a flawless campaign? Flawless? You can't find one flaw, Rob? You look at that campaign, you can't it was nothing but flaws. And her evidence of this is that she got celebrity endorsements. Who the fuck cares who Queen Latifah's voting for? That's your evidence? there's just something about it where it's like you are so unable to grapple with the facts on the ground. It really is like it's got to be like a real indicator of mental illness or something like that. When, if you were to have like look, we all have our views, right? I was accusing Nick Gillespie over at Reason Magazine of this the other day, but I said it's something that the libertarians are often guilty of, is seeing the world the way they wish it was rather than the way it actually is. Because he had made the point that he said something like, if Donald Trump wasn't so harsh with his immigration rhetoric, and if he wasn't such a culture warrior, and if he talked more about deficit spending, he'd be up by 10 points in the polls instead of being neck and neck. And I was like, wait, hold on. Like, I can totally understand someone saying, I wish I lived in a world, you know what I mean? Where you'd be polling better if you were making a sound economic argument. But are you really saying that's what? Like, that's not real. Like, I said, my response was, I said, this is like telling Matt Walsh that if he really wants to sell some tickets, he shouldn't have made What Is a Woman? And he should have made a documentary about deficit spending. Right? Like, what? That's not the way that, like, if you're, Joy Reid, if you're looking at the world the way it actually is, listen, I wish that the number one issue that Americans cared about was central banking and war. Okay, but it's not, right? Like, so, okay, we have to live in the world that we're in. The overwhelming evidence of this presidential election is that turns out celebrity endorsements are next to meaningless. They don't mean anything.
And they shouldn't.
And of course they shouldn't. I mean, like, yeah, you could really, really like Taylor Swift's catchy tunes and also not really care what she thinks about politics. You know, like, I don't know. The idea that anyone would be moved by who Queen Latifah is voting for is insane. But like, the fact that you got all of these celebrity endorsements and they did nothing for you, well, a normal, well-adjusted, non-mentally ill person looks at that and goes, I guess celebrity endorsements just don't really move the needle. But she's looking at it and going, I mean, the campaign was flawless. They got all these celebrity endorsements and it's just got to be because she's a black woman. It can't be that her answer to every single question was, I grew up in a middle-class family. Which, by the way, I would say is a flaw. It's a flaw to not be able to answer a single goddamn question. It's just, so anyway, I don't know. I don't see it. I think these guys are cooked. And I don't think Trump getting in is going to give them a big boost in ratings. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm missing something, but that's my guess. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Sheath Underwear, the best, most comfortable pair of boxer briefs you will ever own. They really are incredible. They're the only underwear that I wear because they're just you just feel like $1 million when you put on a pair of Sheath. And Sheath Underwear comes in a number of different styles, including the brief with the dual pouch that really, listen, I was a skeptic at one time of the dual pouch technology, but let me tell you, it's a game changer. You're never going to look back once you get them. Anyway, go check out Sheath Underwear. Support the sponsor that has been such a loyal sponsor to this show for many, many years now. And while you're at it, get the most comfortable pair of boxer briefs you will ever own. Sheathunderwear.com. Promo code problem20 for 20% off your order. They ship anywhere in the world. Sheathunderwear.com. Promo code problem20 for 20% off. All right, let's get back into the show. What was this that you just shared, Rob?
If you want to play it, it was, I actually thought Joe Scarborough finally coming through and admitting what happened in the election. And it's a half admission because he still wants to pretend that they were doing good reporting.
Let's play the clip. Yeah.
And Frank Bruni says Democrats never got it. And while we were looking at all of the crazy things Donald Trump was saying on the campaign trail, all of the frightening things Donald Trump was saying on the campaign trail, they were looking at their wallet. They were looking what groceries cost, what gas cost, what rent cost, and none of that really penetrated their conscience when they went to vote.
The claim essentially being that they were doing great coverage about the amorality and the problem with the way that Trump would legislate or, be president. But with all that said, people just cared about the economy more and the fact that because all of your horse shit is a luxury good, my friend, and that if you need to actually just get by in life, if the people on MSNBC are making up some horse shit, no one cares.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just like, obviously it's only a half admission. I mean, he's kind of right, but it's also like, yeah, dude, don't think we forget your propaganda that we've played on this show all the time about how great the economy actually is, right? So why wouldn't they be voting for more of it? Look, I mean, it was so ridiculous where they'd constantly make this argument. I mean, even when I was on Piers Morgan a few days ago with those clucking retards, and they were trying to make the argument that like the economy is actually really great. And look at all these numbers. We have such a great economy. And you're like, okay, then why isn't Kamala Harris running on that? I mean, doesn't that destroy your whole argument right there? Like, if that's really true, why wouldn't you mention it? Why wouldn't you feel confident to run on that? No, I'm sorry. If the economy was really great, then people would support the incumbency. They would support the current vice president. That's just not the reality. It's a very bad economy that we're in right now. And so, yes, of course, as you said, it's a perfect way to say it, that it's a luxury good. And all that shit is. As I've said so many times for years, it's like when you're in a very privileged area, people care about, as you put it, the luxury goods. What's offensive? What's racism or sexism? I'm not even saying that like those are never things you should care about. I'm just making the point that you only care about that after all these other things have been met. Similarly to the way that like you only care about having a sick flat screen TV after you have enough food to eat. Right? You have to have the first one in order to ever think about the second one. And if you didn't have enough food to eat, you're never even thinking about spending money on a flat screen TV because it's like, hey, first things first, I'm starving. Like, that's obvious. And in the same way that, like, if you go to a job site or if you go into, like, the inner city, like hood or something like that, nobody's talking about how they're offended by microaggressions. Because they got real shit to worry about. These are hungry people, and you're talking about flat screen TVs. By the way, they have flat screen TVs because the market does wonders. But the point I'm making is that there is like a hierarchy here, and you can't worry about this stuff until you've got all these bases covered. And the people, the millionaires on cable TV, all really care about January 6th and racism and climate change and all of these things that you just don't care about when you're drowning. When you're drowning, you really care about a life preserver. That's what really matters to you. And so, yes, thank you, Joe Scarborough, for your expert hindsight analysis. Yes, that's what those people are voting on, not the garbage that you guys relentlessly focus on every single day. American voters, by and large, do not care about that stuff, and for good reason. For good reason. Because 99% of it is garbage and doesn't matter and is made up, quite frankly. Like, there wasn't an insurrection, and man-made climate change isn't a crisis. And actually, even despite the fact that, woke progressives have brought us, in the wrong direction in terms of race relations, this actually isn't a very racist country. Racism really isn't a problem in America. It's just not true. Like, at least compare to everything else, maybe not compare to some perfect utopia, but compare to every other civilization that's ever existed in the history of the world. We don't have a problem with racism. We've made so much progress you wouldn't believe it. People have no concept of this. If you go to the Dominican Republic and talk about the prejudice between the light-skinned and dark-skinned people there, it's something that Americans have never experienced, at least any Americans alive today. It's something that you'd have to go back to 1940 in Birmingham, Alabama, to get anywhere close to that level. And like, we just don't, you're obsessing over these problems that aren't real. They don't exist. And so what do you expect? You expect people who have real problems to focus on problems that don't exist? Good luck. Good luck with that strategy. Anyway, look, we're living in kind of a new world now. There are lots of incredible possibilities. I will say one thing, because I will say this because we got to wrap up here because I got to get moving and we got to get up to Poughkeepsie. After doing some these big shows that I've done the last few days, and obviously, you know, after supporting Trump in the final stretch of this election, I know, you know, okay, so my Twitter's been blowing up. And one of the things that is kind of like when I did Tucker Carlson last time, but one of the things that a bunch of people have been saying is that I should be the press secretary for Donald Trump. Now, obviously, I think this is said somewhat tongue-in-cheek. This is not going to happen.
That hot lawyer of his.
Yeah, well, you know, obviously, as people know, Joe said on air that he wants to do a podcast with me, Trump, and him. Listen, of course, I would do that in a second. I think that is a long shot that Trump would be willing to do that. I think Joe is certainly willing to do it, and I'm certainly willing to.
I think you should get RFK and JD Vance on this show.
Well, that is something that could potentially happen, but certainly I think Bobby. In fact, I'm going to reach out to Bobby today and ask him to come back because I really do want to talk to him a bunch more about some stuff. But look, I just want to be clear. I know a lot of people are kind of being tongue-in-cheek when they say that, but I would not take that job. I would not do that because look, I may have finally succumbed to just the overwhelming pragmatic argument that it just made sense to support Donald Trump and that this outcome was so much better than Kamala Harris winning. But I'm never going to be in the business of just carrying water for this administration. I'm going to be the guy calling Donald Trump a war criminal, not the guy pretending that he's great on everything. That's what I've always been, and that's what I'm going to continue to be. I think that there is a case for cautious optimism right now, very heavy on the cautious. We're going to learn a lot very quickly with who Donald Trump appoints and whether he frees Ross on day one, whether he's really committed to keeping his promises. Obviously, there's a lot to be optimistic about, but going forward, my role in this is not to get Trump over or to try to paint with rose-colored glasses what his last administration was or what this next administration is going to be. I'm going for my only job in this is to tell the truth. That's what I do. That's my bond with our audience, and that's what I like to do, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. The position of press secretary, the job is to be a liar. So I couldn't do that job even if I wanted to. You know, like what am I going to do? Pretend that he's not terrible on all these issues he's terrible on? So no, we're not going to do that. We're just going to keep doing what we do. I do appreciate all the support, though. I've been kind of, you know, this job that I have is so goddamn weird and kind of surreal. But it is like in moments like this, I am just kind of like, I'm just blown away by the amount of support and the amount of people who love what we do. It's really very cool. So thank you to everybody. And I'll see some of you guys in Poughkeepsie tonight. And then I am going to sleep with the ferocity of 1,000 horses when we're done with that. But okay, thanks for listening, guys. Catch you next time. Peace.